They have like a frat house for the kids.
We do have a theme house for the LGBTs, and the problem with it is right now is it only houses 5 people. But it is a place where they go and they can get resources and have that support by, like I said, by student and faculty. You also want to look at maybe the options. Otterbein has different types of housing options. Obviously, the dorm option is in maybe one unless you're able to actually designate a roommate for that. But they don't set it up accordingly to the LGBTs. There are other options such as suites and apartments and other housing opportunities that you can have. You do have that frat house, you're right,
Yeah.
which is great.
While Ohio State doesn't have a frat house per se, specific to populations, each of our residence halls does have, similar to Michigan State, I think of what Charlie was talking about, a diversity for allies area in each of our residence halls. So it's not specific to one population over the other, and it may not even act as that central research hub or center hub for resources and activities, but it is an area for students who do say, we embrace diversity, we appreciate diversity, and we want to be in an area of our residence hall where this same thought process does happen. So options like that in each of the residence halls, specifically at Ohio State, are available for our students coming in as freshmen.
I think one of the important things to know too about some of the housing here at Ohio State is that while we don't have necessarily gender inclusive housing options, so for example, all of our housing wings are gendered, i.e. on one wing it is female-identified folks living with female-identified folks and male-identified folks living with male-identified people. However, on those floors there are gender-inclusive restrooms that are, the best way to explain it I guess is pod-style bathrooms, i.e. It is shared sinks that are you could be standing next to any kind of gender-identified person while you're brushing your teeth. However, in terms of using other facilities in whatever way you want to define those, i.e. showering and toilets and those kinds of things, are all divided into little pods. So you have your own little room for changing, bathroom use, and showering. And so while the actual rooms aren't gender inclusive, the bathroom facilities are in some of the buildings on campus.
In Michigan State and WashU, they both had gender neutral housing. But if you're a student who wants to look into those options, I would say you need to start pretty early because a lot of times it's a conversation with the director of residence life, the dean of students, and the person who's in like an LGBT coordination role for the university. And sometimes that process can take a little while to just make sure that you're getting through all the hoops and hurdles that a university sometimes puts out there for you.
For that matter, every school defines gender inclusive housing in a different way.
Yeah.
And so there are some people who say that we have gender inclusive housing here on campus, but that doesn't mean you can choose your roommate regardless of gender. There are other schools who call gender inclusive housing, or actually gender neutral housing, i.e. someone can choose non-gendered housing, but essentially that means you're going to have a single. Or it's by floor, or it's by wing. I think that there are only 10, maybe 15 schools across the country who actually have inclusive housing.
Yeah, and what I was talking about in Michigan State is if you identify as transgender and you want to live on a male wing, if you identify as male, but biologically your biological sex is female, you can really work with the director of LGBT and residence life to have that accommodation. And I know one student who was a resident advisor when I was there was a female to male transgender identified individual, and he actually got to be an RA for a male wing. So there are ways, it's just really making sure that you talk to the people you need to talk to.
I think that component is actually really important. After working for several institutions, again, from the missions perspective, the great thing is that for me, I really do see it as a front door. And so if a student is saying, I am trans identified and need to understand how this process is going to work for me, I've had students who started the application process as Molly and ended it as Tom. And so if they're not forward enough in thinking through that process while they're applying, it becomes an issue for residential life, for dean students, for all these different things. And so it's important to be as open as you can be through that process so that they can make the right accommodations once you arrive on campus. Because most campuses want to make sure that if they're admitting a trans student, that they're meeting your needs and desires in terms of housing, in terms of facilities that are going to be there. So being able to have a conversation and exchange those ideas, because most campuses will, again, make sure that they're going to meet the accommodations of your gender identity or kind of where you're going with that. So.
CCAD is actually the only school in the area here that has a form of gender neutral housing, because you can be an upperclassman and they have their upperclassmen residence halls are apartment style, so that you can have men and women can actually apply to live together. That was kind of groundbreaking when they built that building. They decided that men and women could live together in apartments that were on campus. Because, I mean, when you live off campus, you can live in one with the other. So that's why it's kind of silly when schools who have apartment living don't just offer that as gender neutral, because then they can put it on the papers. They go, we got gender neutral housing. We're so cool.
We're open. No terms need to be attached.
The OSU, Michigan State and College side, because I've chaired 2 scholarship committees, one currently at OSU. So I forget when it actually started off, but PFLAG, which there are some representatives from PFLAG in the back, have the Eric Coring Scholarship, and that was the original LGBT scholarship at Ohio State. And currently now I think we have 9 with the Vogel Scholarship, right? And actually one of those scholarships is designated to an incoming first-year transfer student. So I would say that a lot of schools, Michigan State had this too. They only had 3 scholarships, whereas Ohio State had 9. But one of the 3 was designated to an incoming first-year transfer student as well. I think OU does have one. I think Miami of Ohio has one. I think Kent State has one. I know University of Michigan, the University of Southern California. What I would say to do is really look into the GLBT alumni societies or clubs or associations, because a lot of times they're the endowed wing that can provide those scholarships to students going to that school. On a national stage, though, the Point Foundation that they had mentioned have a lot of big national scholarships for students.
I would kind of agree with the Point Foundation. I've been doing some work with them as well, and they're based, well, they have 2 offices technically, but coming out of LA, and they really do a lot of wonderful work for not just undergraduate education, but also graduate education as well. And it's an extensive process in terms of applying and being interviewed and engaging in it. But I think the great thing about the scholarships that they do offer, it can be used on a national and international level. So regardless of where you're going to school or what you're going to study, you can get funds for that, and it will support, depending on how long your education is, the length of that education as well. So I think that's a very good
I'm sorry, real quick, where can you find out about those scholarships?
The Point Foundation.
The Point Foundation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So the resource that our colleagues from OU presented, they have a link there, but the Point Foundation, it's a really great one.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, the other thing that I would add on to that, particularly here at Ohio State, we have both the Sexuality Studies program and a Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies program, both of which offer scholarships via those academic departments. And so then also looking into what your area of scholarship might be and whether or not there are scholarships available for you within those particular units that fit with your interest area.
And I would also say that all scholarships, all the schools offer just very basically merit scholarships that you can, it's not specific, so you can always apply for this, the merit scholarships as well. Regarding the financial aid question, the FAFSA has to be filed for anyone to receive financial aid. This is my area. This is what I know. But the FAFSA is what they have to apply to get the financial aid. Now, if the parents aren't willing to apply or give the information for the FAFSA, you can file the FAFSA without parent information and submit it. It does come back as an invalid FAFSA. What you would then have to do as students, be your advocate, or if you have someone that's an advocate with you, you would go to the financial aid office into the and ask for the special circumstance area, the appeals area, and they would meet with you and determine your situation. And according to federal regulations, you will have to provide some documentation as to were you thrown out of the home, were you homeless, what was the situation, and you would provide documentation from maybe either who you're living with now, not necessarily a social worker, but a pastor or a friend or a counselor who could also see what your situation is to determine whether or not you then can be considered independent. And it would be overridden to an independency, and that would happen every year at that school. If you were to transfer, then they would have to go through the same process at that school to determine your independency. But there are ways that you can. And of course, the other way is that your parents are supportive of your decision, and then we use the parent information and you receive financial aid through that process.
I think it's important to note in the talks of scholarships, specific to diversity scholarships, it's not, do you identify as LGBT? And Charlie, since you work with the Ohio State programs, I think you can attest to this, and probably from Otterbein as well. But as a result of identifying as an LGBT student, what are you doing to promote inclusiveness in your community? Which is in fact a mirror of what our question for our diversity scholarship asks through our Office of Diversity and Inclusion. So it's not enough that you just identify as LGBT, but are you working with the Columbus City Schools GSA programs? Are you working at Stonewall Columbus? Are you working with the Ohio AIDS Task Force? What are you doing that's really helping to enhance the community? So it's not enough just to say, I deserve a scholarship because I'm a gay or lesbian student, but what are you doing to enhance yourself as a gay or lesbian student in your respective communities? And I think that that's a good mindset to have, not just for designated diversity scholarships, but for all of the scholarship programs that you're going to be thinking about in the college admissions and the college search process. So what are you doing that's really setting yourself apart to be a competitive applicant for these scholarship programs that the schools have to offer to you?
And Mark brings up a really good point, because sometimes a lot of students who are the best applicants in the process are ally students. They may have taken on more responsibilities and done more things in the community than students who identify as LGBT. So for those of students who are allies, who are out in the room now, or those who are watching on TV, I would say don't be afraid of applying for these scholarships as well, especially if you've started a GSA at your high school, you have done work with community organizations, because you are still, helping further the LGBT cause.
As for Otterbein, hi everyone, my name is Liz Licking. I am representative for Otterbein University. I'm president of Free Zone, which is our GLBTQIA alliance. So on the scholarship question, we don't currently have anything specific to LGBT students. We have the typical things you might expect, which would be like you have parents who are alum, or you've got an excellent GPA in high school, that sort of thing. That said, I talked to our faculty advisor yesterday afternoon in regards to a couple of these questions that I wanted to submit anything into the process. And she told me that they're in the process of working on getting one. I think it's specific to students who maybe have lost the chance to go to college, who their parents have disowned them based on identity. And they're working on building a scholarship to a grant application. So there's a process that they're trying to add that to our school.
State, we have so many that I don't even think we could list them all. We have a lot.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is really neat about Ohio State, not only do we have obviously the majors and minors in sexuality studies and women, gender, and sexuality studies, but each of the different academic departments across campus offer different classes centered around sexual orientation and gender identity. So for example, whether you're in the social work department trying to ascertain how to provide culturally inclusive services for folks. You can also find classes in the education department, probably not so much the math department. However, in terms of history and philosophy and all of those different areas, you're going to find very inclusive classes across the academic spectrum, in addition to both majors and minors in sexuality studies, should you choose to pursue that.
The 9 academic areas at Columbus College of Art and Design are really focused in art and design, so the specifics of a department or a program really don't lend themselves to creating classes directly related to LGBT issues. However, I did do my work in research and did see that over time, faculty, again, are open to doing a lot of different things, have had classes of gay and lesbian images in the media, or gay and lesbian images of art, or kind of a question about querying art. So I think there is that openness and opportunity to create individual courses as a faculty member so desires. But our students are also privileged enough that we do have association affiliations with places like the Ohio State University, Columbus State Community College, so the students can take some of these different courses that are offered that may be in particular areas at those particular institutions.
I can actually start this off because I was out in college, but I did not identify, I was kind of one of the people that Tim talked about, like I did not identify with the LGBT campus here in Columbus, or on Ohio State's campus. I did things in the city, but here I was president of my fraternity, which was not an LGBT identified fraternity. I was an orientation leader, I was on student government. But I think that was the good thing about living in Columbus is that you could be involved on campus if that's what you wanted to be in the LGBT community, but you could also be involved in the city. So it's interesting coming back now and being involved in LGBT issues on a college campus because I was not that student. But even in Greek life here, I felt very supported. So if you're a person who, you know, maybe you don't want to be involved in LGBT organizations, you want to be involved in something else. As a student here at Ohio State, I found it supported everywhere. I felt like there was an ally pretty much everywhere that I was going on campus.
I went to a small little college about north of here, about an hour, called Kenyon College. It was interesting for me because I think that as a community at the time, and it's a small school, about 1,400, 1,500 students now. At the time, there really weren't a lot of students who were out and really out on campus. When I got to campus, I was out. There was no questions about it. But I think that for me, it was a small portion of who I was and how I existed, and didn't really think that it was essential to be, you know, the out person or the representative for LGBT populations. Over time, though, I realized that there were a group of students who were coming behind me that that may need to feel comfortable or understand community. And so I spent a lot of time working towards really shifting the mindset of the campus and really shifting the way that we interacted and worked around and talked about issues as it related to LGBT issues. And so by the time that I graduated, I had, you know, been president of the Gay Straight Alliance. You know, I was my pledge class president in my fraternity, which was great because for a lot of the Greeks, it was the first time that anyone in the Greek system was out and really out. To the entire campus, and so that was great. You know, we started taking field trips into Columbus because I really wanted to make sure that the students on our campus, about an hour away, really understood that there was a larger community that was there and that was accepted and they could plug into. When I graduated, I started the process of starting the first LGBT resource center on campus. And so while as a student I didn't get to see it come to fruition, but a year after I graduated and I was working on campus in the admissions office, I was then the first administrative director for the LGBT Center on campus, which was really exciting to see kind of in a 5 to 6 year period how things had shifted and changed. And even just recently I was on an email where the conversation was about building a new center, a larger center, a real actual center for LGBT students on campus. So that was exciting. I think what's been great for me is to be able to have been plugged into so many different college campuses across the country. And then also as a college counselor to work with students who are looking at these different perspectives. And I think to think about where it was when I was looking at college and not being able to have that conversation about being gay and being out with my college counselor, and then knowing, you know, years later I was the college counselor who a student was talking to, and really thinking that being out was going to be essential and important to who they were and finding a community. So things have shifted. I mean, I think things have really changed. I won't tell you how long it's been, but I'm only 15. But things have, long, 21. And things have really changed, and I think it's great. I think that the momentum that has happened has been wonderful. And for me, I'm talking too much now because I'm telling my story, so I get excited. You know, from the person that I was when I started at college to now currently sitting on the steering committee for the National Organization for the Human Rights Campaign, or working with the Point Foundation, or, you know, knowing that I'm plugged into communities across the nation that really are helping LGBT issues. I think it's been a phenomenal kind of evolution for me, and, you know, and what I see the community has happened. So I'll stop talking.
I can speak to this. I have a really great experience. But I went to the College of William and Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia. I'm familiar with that back in the early 90s. And there was a group called Alternatives. I was a first-year student, and I looked up the information about this group, and it said it was for people who had alternative dating lifestyles, one of which included interracial couples. And I was in an interracial couple, relationship with a man at the time, so I just went to the group. And that's not really what it was for, frankly. Everyone else there was not there for that. And so it was really a cover group, right? I didn't know this. It was like my third week at school. I had no idea where I was going. And so at first I was really freaked out that I had come to the wrong place. And we went around the room, and the question that you had to answer when you were introducing yourself was, name one gay person you know outside of this room. And a lot of people said, no one. And that's what it was like. Anyway, I eventually came out in my first year there, thanks primarily to that group of folks there who didn't shun me for acting like an idiot my first time. I was very lucky. And, but you know, when I talk about Columbus State, I need to keep in mind, I'm glad that you asked this question, because I need to keep in mind that experience. And honestly, by my third year there, I was getting anonymous hate mail and anonymous hate phone calls on a fairly regular basis. I had a really good relationship with the police. They saw me weekly. I ended up having to move out of the dorms because I was afraid to live in the dorms, and I ended up having to do my final semester out of state because my mother was afraid that I was going to get hurt. So, you know, I can't say that that's true at Columbus State right now. It doesn't. So things are very different in that way.
I've been at Otterbein for about 20 years in the financial aid office, and I just want to know that it knows that 20 years, a large swing has changed, and it is a very receptive and very open campus from the time that I started 20 years ago. And big swings happen. However, more has to happen across the board. But it's I have seen in the 20 years huge change. I went to Otterbein after I started working there. I was one of these late bloomers, raised my kids and then to school. So, but from '96 on, when I graduated. But I just working there was able to see the difference and the change and the openness in that campus. And Otterbein is an affiliated school. It's United Methodist affiliated.
I'm from West Virginia, and I went to this college in 1999, which was a time when I think there was like the crux of this change and shift in the world, because gay started being way more in mainstream media around that time. I actually was just talking about this with friends last night because we looked up that Will and Grace that first debuted in 1998. Which everybody thought was a lot sooner than that. I'm like, no, I think it was my senior year when we finally started seeing gay people on TV, and I was like, oh, maybe I'm gay. Because from West Virginia, I had no idea. I just didn't know. There was nothing out there to tell me what it meant, my feelings were, and everything was just don't ask, don't tell in West Virginia, which partially it still is, in terms of, you know, like there are gay people, and you just talk about them like they're your friends and everything, but you just don't talk about that part of it. You know. Yeah, everybody has a roommate. So I went to West Virginia University, and they had a group called Bi GLM, Bi Lesbian Gay Mountaineers, and it was horribly shunned on campus. There were probably 30 people out of a 20,000 member campus. Even the advisors that were advising it were not out in their position on campus, even though they were gay and lesbian. The community was very small town gay bar, which is a documentary that's very good if you ever want to watch it. That's definitely the environment that was there when I started, but I think now when I go back and I talk to people and I look at what they have, they still don't have a center, they still just have their student organization, they don't have any things on campus. The gay bar would come once a year and do a drag queen bingo in the ballroom on campus, but it was very controversial, so that could only happen one time a year. So that was the only gay event that was happening at West Virginia University, and now it's like 25,000 students. I mean, it's equivalent, it's very similar to OU as well, maybe Michigan State, but I'm hopeful it is better. But I know it's fun now to be so out and crazy in Columbus and be able to not have to just pass as straight and just go out and be gay. Because I even remember when I graduated from undergrad in 2000, I spent 6 years, so I graduated in 2005. I was still being told by my faculty mentors, who were all okay with me being gay, but they were all telling me, as a music educator, they were really glad that I would pass, that I would come across as straight in front of the room, because they thought then that meant I could definitely get a job. Because they were still worried that I would get a job as a music teacher, gay man, graduated in 2005. So, very interesting, different experience. And now the students I work with, everybody comes in and they're all out and they're all gay and they're all happy. Most of them. So it's very fun to see that shift in 10, 15 years. It's drastic.